The virtual stage is yours. Attendees, the Q&A is open. The chat is not open for you to type in. Please type your questions in the Q&A and we'll be able to answer some of those live. Or our colleague Shannon in Residence Life is also behind the scenes and may type you your answer. It's all yours.
Thanks, Summer. Thank you, Shannon, for monitoring the chat. And thanks to you all for being here and taking some time to learn more about what we do in Residence Life. Like Summer said, my name is Michael Lee Sullivan. I serve as the assistant director in the office. It might be helpful just to give you a little bit of context of what I do, and that might spur some new questions for you. So I oversee our engagement efforts in the Office of Residence Life. We have a pretty intentional curriculum built into the work that we do. Anytime we're engaging with students, we have a very intentional plan of education and support that we're providing through that. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. I have a short presentation that I want to share with you before we move into the Q&A session. It'll be about 20 minutes. But please, bring the questions you have at the start of this, but then maybe think of other questions, and hopefully you'll learn something new about Residence Life and how we work with students that you didn't know before. So I'm going to share my screen. So forgive me for a moment. Okay. So like I said, I just want to take a few minutes just to talk a little bit about the work that we do through our office and the structure of our office and what that looks like. When we're talking about Residence Life, and Summer did a good job of kind of setting up, we are different from housing, our partners in housing. We work closely with them. But when I think about housing, that's the physical building, so the spaces and the places where we're housing our residents. So they're handling a lot of those logistical pieces and the assignments. And like Summer said, they're very busy. They're really moving a lot of pieces right now. Residence Life, we are the people inside of the building. I think of the work that we do being separated into two different categories that sometimes overlap. So like I said, we do all of the engagement with the students, and that's very intentional work that we do in thinking about, the time that we spend with students is valuable. Our students at Pitt are pretty busy. They have full schedules and they have social lives and they have things going on. And so we want to make sure that when we're engaging with them, there's a lot of intention and support and striving towards student success when we're connecting with them. The other piece that we do in Residence Life is that wellness and safety component. So we enforce policies. We make sure that we have policies in place that are there to protect students' wellness, their safety, and we get students connected to the resources and the supports that they need to make sure that they are staying safe and they are staying well while they are with us in the residential halls. So just a little bit about our staffing structure so you understand. I think maybe I'll start at the bottom of this list and work my way up, because the bottom of the list is going to be the highest contact point with your student. And that's our resident assistants, or if you have students living on the Bridge on Forbes, community assistant. Same sort of position. These are our peer resident assistants, so upper class students who live on the floors with your residents in the residential halls. Their task is, again, just to enforce policy, ensure the safety of the students, but really, I'm concerned about the level of engagement. Our expectation is that our resident assistants are getting to know each and every person in the residential halls. We have some intentional programs. I'll talk briefly about those to help make sure that happens. And we want to make sure they're getting connected with the students in case your students have questions or they're wanting to know like areas to navigate or they have concerns, or sometimes they're there just to chat because they're feeling homesick or they're feeling like they're not making friends. Our resident assistants are trained, they're specialized in dialoguing with students and getting them connected to the resources that they need. The resident assistants are supervised by our resident director. So we have resident directors staffed in each of our residential halls. There's one per residential hall. And these are our professional live on campus staff members who oversee each residential building. So they work with their team of RAs on plans of support for their buildings. They're able to identify what are the needs of the particular population in the building. And then if we have situations that are being elevated or escalated with residents, they also provide one-on-one support in moments of need. Above them are area coordinators, and these are folks who are actually overseeing full areas. We have a very large campus, it's a huge institution, and so we divide that into different areas just for ease and sake of supervision. And then we also have our administrative staff. These are the folks that live in our central office. These are the folks who are doing really amazing work, Shannon being one of them right now, behind the scenes, answering emails, answering phones, supporting us in the work that we do. And then central staff, myself, assistant director, associate director, Kayla Dunn does a lot of our staff support services. And then, of course, Amanda, that Summer already mentioned, is the director of the office. So what can students expect when they come to Pitt and engage with our office? We really emphasize relationship building at multiple levels. And like I said, we have very intentional programming that has been put into place to make sure that that happens. That starts on day one when they move into the room and potentially are living with one or more roommates in their space. We have a very intentional roommate agreement process that we are going through with each residential student in the first couple of weeks. The expectation is that they're sitting down and having a conversation with their roommate or the roommates to talk about what they need to be successful. And that can be tricky because that might not be a space they've been in before or have had to think about what are my needs. And now all of a sudden they're having to vocalize that. But we do kind of work through the process with them. Our resident assistants do a great job of helping to support that communication and that sort of dialoguing process as part of the roommate agreement. And then, like, let's be real, we have to work on mediation support sometimes. Conflict is inevitable in this world. And it happens in a small space when we're sharing things and having to like negotiate those needs. So our resident assistants also help to provide mediation support. If it's something that gets escalated, again, we have resident directors who are there to sort of like assess the situation to determine, what is the best next step. But we don't ever want to just like default to like, there's conflict, we need to change the room. We're really trying to support students to like dialogue and mediate and work through conflict if possible. Beyond that, it's relationships with the students and those that live around them. So we do a lot of programming for their specific floor. This is part of a larger effort of this institution to make a large institution feel like a smaller place, right? So we do a lot of floor programs. We run a community standards process, which is a great time for all the residents on the floor to get together to talk about what their expectations and their needs are in a community and to kind of negotiate and write that out. And then we do building-wide programs too. We have some really amazing building-wide programs. Some have been going on, for decades at this point, and they're pretty popular. But also, I recognize, not everyone wants to go to like a massive bash and hang out with like 150 other people. So we really do try to like offer a variety of engagement opportunities to meet the needs of everybody. We don't want somebody just hanging out in the room because they're afraid of large crowds. And then, of course, they're developing intentional relationships with their resident assistants. That's something I already talked about. We have 2 rounds of a process called check-in conversations that happen in the academic year, one in the fall semester and one in the spring semester. That's a time when our resident assistant will reach out to your student and say, hey, can we just schedule a quick 10-minute check-in conversation? And that's just an opportunity for our resident assistants to gauge where your students are at in that moment. What are the stresses that are happening? How are your classes going? Do you have any concerns? Are you fitting in? Tell me about like your amazing experience. We get a lot of different ways that students are showing up in that space. But if our resident assistants are noticing areas of concerns, that's something that they can direct to our professional staff members, our resident directors, who can then get that student connected to potential resources or support if that's something that they feel like would be helpful for them. And then, of course, we want to connect them to the university campus. We have amazing resources here for students. And we live in a really fabulous city. Pittsburgh is wonderful. There's so many opportunities. I just took my family to Picklesburg last weekend. So eat a pickle 500 different ways it was prepared. Have fun, hang out in the community. It's a beautiful space. And if your student hasn't been here before, it's really great to take advantage of all the resources that are in the city. So we try to do that through some of the programming that we're offering. And like I said, our second thing beyond just engagement is just getting them connected to resources for their own safety and well-being. We have a lot of those. If there's more questions, I'm happy to talk about that. But we do have other partners that we worked with on campus just to make sure that your students feel supported and well-resourced. I don't want to go too much into this, but I did feel like it was important just to share what our curriculum in the Office of Residence Life looks like. I did a Panther Connect session last week, and I don't know, maybe I talked to some of you if you came over to my table. But I think the message I kept trying to reiterate to families as they were coming over is the college experience, in my opinion, is the learning that happens in the classroom and then the learning that happens outside of the classroom. They're just as important. We're doing just as much learning and education outside of the classroom as we are inside of the classroom. And so we're very intentional about that. We have 3 main learning goals in our office. That's awareness of self, developing that self-awareness. We do a lot of work around inclusion and belonging. If you're coming, when I started college, I came from a very small rural area in central Pennsylvania, and didn't see a lot of diversity or know a lot about people who had different experiences than me. And so we do a lot to like work around that. And then community development. We're very intentional in trying to build community and to get folks to think about the value of community. That's something that we help to build in the residential halls through the engagement that we do. And so there's a lot of different ways that we're trying to get students connected to that so that they're not holed up in the room and thinking that the college journey is just all on them to do on their own. Just some tips and tricks for parents. This was something our director Amanda put out here. Maybe some things to think about or to talk with your student as you're gearing up and getting ready to move into the residential halls. Just talking about roommate relationships. How comfortable is your student with just engaging in a dialogue if they feel like they need to give feedback or if they feel like something's not going well. If they get upset, how are they showing up? Are they just going to start slamming doors? Are they able to get to a place where like maybe they can work through that? This is part of the coaching and support that we provide when we're connecting with students, but it might also be good to think and have a discussion with your students before they get here about how comfortable they are in sort of advocating for themselves and receiving feedback. Um, if you have a student that's living in a single room, I would encourage them to think about how they're getting outside and getting connected. Maybe their jam is not going to res hall programming. There's a lot of things that are happening on campus. But it would be worthwhile to have a conversation to think about how am I getting connected and pulling myself out of my room. And we do try to do our best on our end in Res Life to make sure that students aren't isolated like that. Again, I think I've talked enough about the value and the importance of getting to know their RA, and certainly encourage them to respond to their RA if the RA is reaching out and wanting to connect. That's meant to do out of a sense of care and support for your students. And they're also welcome to get to know the RD. Our RDs have offices in the residential halls. And they're also a professional staff member who's been well trained and knows this work well. So they would be happy to be able to chat with them if they have concerns, if they just want to like ask questions, anything. The resident director is a great person to get to know. I would say welcome week. There is a lot happening and it's a lot of really fabulous programming. I go back to myself again. I was pretty introverted when I started college and I didn't want to have anything to do with large crowds and all these big gatherings. I think that's okay. I think we can normalize that like students are going to show up and want to engage in a lot of different ways. Maybe they're going to want to take advantage of all of those opportunities in week one. Maybe some folks just need a moment just to like pause and decompress and get settled. And that's cool too. I think just being okay with like where they are when they're showing up, giving them that opportunity to settle in, but then encourage them to just get out of the room and maybe try to connect. And just like I said, I think with everything we try to do, we emphasize the importance of building relationships. We really emphasize the importance of communication. So that's just something to talk to your student as they're getting ready to come to Pitt and meeting all these new people and having all these new resources and connections. So just having them think about their level of comfort, and maybe it's sometimes, like I tell my 15-year-old, like, hey, did you say hi to that person? No? Okay, why don't you try that next time and see how it goes? Usually it's not that bad. So those types of coaching conversations. This is just our contact information. I'll leave this up here. I'm pretty sure this was the last slide I had to share. So I can start with any questions that you all have, and I think Summer's gonna field those for me.
Yes, I'm here. We have an awesome first question. Shannon has been typing away in the Q&A as well. Thank you, Shannon. I see you typing furiously.
Thank you, Shannon.
First, and Michael Lee, I think you're gonna have so much fun with this question. It is, are there any best practice discussions that can be communicated to the first year students, maybe from RAs or others, about how to be good with time and their classes, activities, and clubs to try, and following their best self and personality?
Yeah, I think one of the tips that I just read about, you know, uh, just taking your time and letting your students settle in and telling them that's okay. It's Pitt is such a huge institution, and I think it's really easy sometimes to get lost in the sauce of like, I see everybody going out and doing all these wild things, and I know that's what I should be doing too. Well, you should be doing what feels comfortable for you. And again, I would encourage your student once they get settled to think about how they can start to like encourage themselves or be brave and maybe try out something new. And that's what's really wonderful about living in a residential hall is we have those staff supports in place to kind of provide that guiding support. And that's okay too. Like you don't have to come in day one to Pitt and be the most popular social butterfly. And I think just normalizing that is a good place to start, and to normalize that like college is scary and we're all feeling anxious about this, especially if this is the first time you're sending a student away to college. I'm sure you have anxiety about that. How could you not? um and just normalizing all of those feelings, but then really talking to your student about like asking for support. That's another huge piece of what we try to do. We try to help to build up students' ability to just ask for help and to normalize that. So those are good places to start. You don't have to jump in 100% on day one. Like, ease into it, take your time, it will come, and give yourselves moments of bravery to step in and maybe try out something new. And, you know, like I said to my kid, just go say hi, see how it goes.
Excellent. Sorry, I was having trouble unmuting. I was looking through all the Q&A questions and got distracted as well. Our next one, I'm not positive this might be a Panther Central question, but Shannon pushed it to answer it live, so we're going to give it a try. It is, if your student is living in an apartment style residence hall, like the Pennsylvania apartments, are you allowed to bring appliances like a coffee maker or air fryer, or is that still prohibited like it is in the residence halls? And will they have an RA in residence or not? What are some of the differences between apartment style residence halls and regular residence halls, specifically for first year students? And I can repeat parts of that as we move through that question.
Yeah. So the Pennsylvania style apartments are brand spanking new for us this year, and they're currently setting those up to be ready to go as residential halls for August. So I have not been given those details, and I agree with Summer. It would be your best bet would be to call PC and have those questions answered. I would also keep an eye. I know Shannon's putting in some helpful links as she goes along too. If you go on to our website, we still have the 24-25 academic year residential handbook. So again, it's not been updated yet for the upcoming year. It will go live at the start of the academic year, but that gives you a good idea of what are the appliances, things that you're allowed to bring, and what are the things that are prohibited. Now, to the point that this person is making, I don't know all of those details about the Pennsylvania apartments because they're new. But I would definitely be checking the housing website for the most updated list. I would say, in general, a lot of what we talk about in terms of like things that are allowed and things are not allowed, does it have an exposed heating element that is potentially a fire hazard? That's our main concern, are things that are a fire hazard. Now, again, maybe you don't know what all those things are. I don't want to sit here and list everything, and I certainly haven't memorized that list, but our 24-25 residential handbook does have that list of items, and we will have that up on our housing website for the updated residential hall as soon as we're able to.
Excellent. Another question, and I'm sure this is a question we get often. I know Michael Lee, as a parent and a parent of a teenager myself, that bathroom cleaning can be a real thing. So this question is, how often are the communal bathrooms cleaned and who is responsible for cleaning them?
So we have housekeeping staff. They are housed under our business housing auxiliary services, BHOS is what we call it, division. So they fall under the housing piece, and they are cleaned daily. Sometimes they really do try to be mindful around working around busy times of schedules, and each in our traditional residential halls, and that when I say traditional residential halls, I mean the spaces where we have like a communal bathroom on a floor. um we also have single like a single stall bathroom, single use, is behind a closed door, that you can use. You can go on to another floor if they're cleaning the bathrooms, but they have that schedule up and students are aware of when the cleaning is happening. But they're trying to be mindful of not hitting that during high traffic times. But yes, daily cleaned.
Excellent. I'm actually going to turn on my camera because we've got one or two questions in the Q&A that I think are actually for me. So I'll answer those since we're here. And so this question is, this person had heard that Welcome Week was only for students. However, they were surprised to see on the schedule that there are Pitt family events. What is expected? Excellent question. Because I coordinate those Pitt family events, I'm really excited that you looked at the schedule. The Welcome Week schedule for this year is not yet live. So if you are there right now being like, wait, I didn't see the Welcome Week schedule yet. Correct. It is not live yet. It will come out very soon. This person's probably looking at a previous Welcome Week schedule. But yes, we will still have family events during Welcome Week, mainly that Monday and Tuesday. But here's the thing, if you hear nothing else from me, please hear this. Your number one priority is to support your student. If you can come to the programs that we have for our parents and families on Monday and Tuesday, excellent. We would love to see you, and we'll have some snacks and a place for you to sit down and take a breather from arrival. However, please do not feel like you are trying to rush or get to something that we're hosting, because every resource program that we do, we will repeat it virtually in this exact same sort of webinar format, which we will record and post to the Pitt Student Affairs YouTube. So we will not let you miss critical information that will help you to support your student, but we want you to be with your student first. All families are also welcome to join us on Tuesday for our first year frenzy, which is a Welcome Week social program on the cathedral lawn, but we will have a family specific tent with some fun things to do. And we have lots of sibling activities along the way. So if you are bringing younger siblings to campus during arrival, that's really exciting. We hope that they'll be a Pitt Panther in just a few years, but we will have some things for them to do along the way too. But please do not stress out. Or if your arrival day doesn't allow you to come to one of those events, please do not stress. We will repeat them again. The other question was really similar, but it was, will the Welcome Week agenda be sent to students in advance of the week so they know what to expect and can plan what activities to do? Yes. My answer is it will be released very, very soon. I do not know the exact date that the Welcome Week schedule will go live, but hopefully as a first year family, you have been getting bi-weekly emails from us that look exactly like the emails your students get from Student Affairs, but with some parent specific, my goodness, information. And so that Welcome Week schedule will be included in that as soon as that comes out. There are a lot of questions in the Q&A that I'm seeing that are about housing related or Panther Central specific. We are not ignoring you if we're not able to answer them. I just don't want to give you half information or potentially wrong information because it's not our area of expertise. That is a good question potentially for Panther Central or for our follow-up webinar on Monday. That registration information is in the chat. All right, Michael Lee, next question for you. This person's student was assigned to a single room. This student is a little bit introverted. Will the whole floor of singles meet and have opportunities? How will they get involved? This is such a good question.
Yeah. So, well, and to your point, you're just talking about Welcome Week events. We do have a number of Welcome Week events that are mandatory, meaning that the RAs will go around, collect the residents on the floor, and bring them out together. So there's a lot that's happening in that Welcome Week time period that will highly encourage them to come out of their rooms. I mean, can't make anyone do something that they don't want to do. But again, if you have an introverted student, this is a good time to talk to them and about just like the role of the RA, get connected to the RA. I'm the same way. I'm like a one-on-one gal. Like large crowds, I'm going to sink back to the back of the room. I don't want to have anything to do with it. But if I can just find one support, one person that I can connect with, that's a good way to get out of my space and maybe into a brave space, and I'm going to try something new that I wouldn't have done otherwise. So again, our resident assistants are really primed to do that with students. And even, encouraging your student to just name that for the resident assistant. Resident assistants are also well versed in confidentiality, and they understand that is an important part of the role. So if a student is sharing a concern that they have, or they're sharing a vulnerable space that they're in, like, hey, I'm not really comfortable in a crowd, like, do you have thoughts or ideas for me? That resident assistant is going to be the person that they should be talking to get connected. um Beyond that, like I said, we have our community standards meeting. There's going to be a first floor meeting, so that's going to include that community standards process where folks get to go around and name needs that are important for them in a residential hall and a shared living space. They're going to have first floor meetings. And then beyond the check-in conversations, which is that one-on-one time that I said they'll schedule with a resident assistant, a lot of it will be on the student to get out of the room and, take those steps to engage in ways that feel comfortable for them. So again, I would encourage you as a parent or guardian to just give them some grace and some space to adjust and get comfortable. And then beyond that, encouraging the students to take those brave steps to maybe go out, and maybe it's attending residential programs. Our RAs do a great job of just saying, here's this cool event that's happening on campus, or here's this cool event that's happening off campus. Let's all gather and go to that together. Because a lot of times it's easier to go with a group than it is to go on your own and not know who's going to be there, or maybe you feel weird about showing up to something on your own. So we really do try to tailor that. This is such a huge concern I hear from so many parents. Like, how do I get my student out of this space? We do a lot during welcome week, but the reality is it's important to have conversations, be curious about what they're comfortable with and what they might want to try to do in their first semester in college, because there is a part of that that is going to be on them.
Excellent, thank you. I need to correct an error. The welcome week schedule is out. I think it went out in the newsletter yesterday, it seems, which is fantastic. I did just put it in the chat, that link. Thank you to those who pointed it out. I am sorry for that, but it is there. It is accurate. That is the correct one. Next question for you, Michaelie, is, are there designated quiet hours?
Yeah. So our quiet hours, and I'm looking at my cheat sheet now. Our quiet hours are Sunday through Thursday, 10 p.m. to 8 a.m. And on Friday and Saturday, those quiet hours are 11 p.m. to 8 a.m. The exception to that rule is during finals week, when our residential halls have implemented a 24-hour per day quiet hour. If you have a student who has issues with a noisy neighbor, I would encourage that student to go in and have a direct conversation. If they're not comfortable doing that, they should connect with their RAs. Our RAs are there to enforce our policy. Yeah, I think that's all I have to say about that. We have quiet hours in place. We want to make sure that our students are staying rested and that they're able to focus and do what they need to do to be successful.
Thank you. This next question is definitely a question that is really hard the first time this happens for your first year student. And I'm so glad someone asked this. It is, what is the protocol if a student gets very sick in the residence hall and needs to go to the hospital? This happened to their son at another school, and they were the one trying to get an ambulance while they were living out of state. It was not an easy process, took multiple phone calls. So how does this work at Pitt? How do they get someone in the residence hall to check on them and get them to a hospital?
Yeah, I mean, it can happen multiple ways. If the student is actually physically not able to walk themselves over to our student health office, they can call PC. PC will then alert the RA. I'm making an assumption maybe this happens after regular business hours. We have resident assistants who are on duty 24 hours a day. So if something happens, they have a concern, the roommate has a concern, my roommate's sick or I'm not feeling well, call PC. PC will alert the RA. And then at that point, probably the resident director on call would come down, get involved. And then ultimately, a lot of times we do have to call EMT. We have Presby Hospital is just up the hill. It's not uncommon for students to have to be transported. That's something we do deal with regularly and something that our staff and the building would be used to accommodating. So that's definitely there if needed.
Thank you. We have another question along the lines of safety. If they don't hear from their student, is there someone they can contact to make sure they're okay?
Yeah, actually, and I'm glad you asked this question because it made me think that I forgot an important detail. If your student is transported to the hospital, we will notify the emergency contact on file. So that is an important piece of communication to have with your student as they ramp up and getting ready to move in. Make sure that they have the emergency contact. And I don't know the exact process in when the emergency contact is filled out. I think that may be part of the housing process. That's where that information is kept, but that's information that our staff has access to. So if we transport a student, we will call you. We can't give you details. That's a FERPA privacy thing. So we won't be able to share details about that, but we will at least be able to tell you where your student is and how to get a hold of them. If you haven't heard from your student or you have some major concerns about their well-being, call Panther Central. We have a process called a wellness check that we will run. PC will call the resident director of that building. That resident director will then go up and knock and make contact with that student. If for some reason that student is not there or we have additional concerns, we'll elevate that concern and get campus police involved in the process. Again, this is the tricky part of like transitioning from like secondary school into higher education. We're not able to share details about that student, and we can't ever make a student talk to you if they don't want to. But what we will be able to do is call you back and confirm whether we were able to make contact with them or not.
Thank you. Here's one that's been pushed to answer live. That's definitely switching gears from safety to parking. Do you know how parking is handled on move-in day? This family specifically is going to Nordenberg, so lower campus, and their assigned time is 8 to 11, but there's no way we can be there that early. We talk a little bit about parking and if you're able to touch on it, knowing this is very much a Department of Housing area
Yeah.
parking.
Um, I have a website that I would ask Shannon to put in the chat. It's the Pitt Arrival website. They will have all of these details there. I don't want to tell you from past experience because you'll find out if you don't know this already. Oakland is always under construction. There's always something that's happening. Right now, they're upgrading the bus route and making it really fabulous and easy to use. But that's causing some major construction. I don't know how that's going to impact us on move-in day. So you definitely want to check out that Pitt Arrival website because that'll have the most up-to-date information. And if you have questions about, I can't make this time, there's flexibility there, of course, but that'll give you the details that you need.
Excellent. I also put that in the chat, but it is just arrival.pitt.edu. Next question. Um, this one sort of makes me laugh because, with college students learning as they're learning to clean up after themselves and living independently, this can happen. But how
Mhm.
common are roaches and mice? And how can you avoid them by being careful with open food? What are some tips?
I would say if I don't know how common it is, I would say probably not common. It's not something that enters into my day-to-day conversation working in residence life. But I would say, yeah, definitely this is a good time to have a conversation with your student about like what are some of the impacts or consequences of like keeping a space dirty or not tidying up. Like there's pest consequences, there's maybe angry roommate consequences, not happy living space consequences. So we will do our best to support students. And if it's something that they think they need help with in terms of like keeping a clean space, talk to your RA again about how you do that. Outside of that, just logistically, if your student sees a mouse or they see a cockroach or anything like that, we have a QR code that they'll scan. They'll see the signs when they go into the building and they can just submit a ticket for our maintenance team and they will take care of that, address that problem very quickly because that's definitely not something we want and something we're going to take care of pretty quick.
Thank you. This question is, are the RAs in traditionally upper class residence halls like Lothrop prepared to help the first year students who didn't get the residence hall they wanted?
Yeah, absolutely. Lothrop is one of those mixed first year and upper class situations. All of our resident assistants go through the same training. It's in my perspective, I worked in higher ed for 20 years. I worked at a lot of different institutions. This is one of the most robust training programs I've ever seen. And major props to our associate director, Kayla Dunn, for putting that together. But we do a very intensive week-long training period. It is around safety. It is around what you're doing on duty. It is about engagement. It is around programming expectations. It's about supporting productive dialogue and supporting mediation. We run through it all. They also have an asynchronous training that they're working through. So there's a lot that we do. Everybody receives the same type of training. Every resident assistant has the same expectations in terms of their engagement, whether they're working with a first year or an upper class floor. I would say Lothrop houses two of our living learning communities. That's the program I oversee in our office, nursing and our gender and sexuality. Those have been great spaces for upper class students to be almost in a mentorship role for our first year students. So a lot of folks are connecting, they're building an amazing community in that gender and sexuality LLC. And for nursing, we get a lot of folks who are like, they're in the same class together, or maybe they're living next to an upper class student who had that class last year. So they're bonding over those shared academic experiences. And while I'm here and talking about the living learning communities, I will say if your student is living in a building where there's a living learning community, whether they signed up for that or not, if they're in that building, they will have access to those engagement opportunities in that community as well.
Excellent. Here's another question about some amenities, specifically bathrooms. This student is in the Forbes Hall triple that has a shared private bathroom. Is toilet paper provided?
Yes,
Is
yes,
there
toilet paper is
anywhere, as a follow-up, is there any on campus housing that toilet paper would not be provided. So thinking about it the other way, should families be aware of anywhere?
No.
Perfect. Excellent. Hold on, let me find the next one. Scrolling away. This question is, do we need any personal renter's insurance for the residence halls?
So I thought maybe this question was coming, and I'll just read you what we have written in the residential handbook. So we say residents are responsible for having adequate and appropriate insurance to protect against any loss or damage to the resident's personal property while on university premises, and or to cover damage caused by the resident to university property. Um, so I would say it's figure out what that situation looks like for you. One thing I know that our director Amanda mentioned last year when she did this webinar was that if you have homeowners insurance, to read through that policy, because it could be that you have some sort of coverage for rentals or for college that is a part of that. So just read through that before making the decision to get renter's insurance if that's something that you want to do. But that's just what our residential handbook says.
Wonderful. The next question is, do students undergo fire drills during welcome week or that first week so that they know what the protocols are if there's ever a fire?
Yeah, I can't speak to the exact timing of when that will happen. But yes, absolutely. We run through fire drills and we do that exactly so that we make sure residents, staff, welcome attendants, everybody knows what that process looks like. And it's always fun to do that and then bring them back into the building and have everybody swipe in. I've helped out with a lot of those. Maybe that's something to talk to your student about. You know, sometimes they happen at inconvenient times, but they are there for safety. And it is absolutely a necessity that students are leaving their room and getting out into the lobby and connecting with our safety team there when they hear a fire alarm. They should not be staying in their room for any reason.
Thank you. I'm going to try to put these next two questions together. They're very similar to the toilet paper. What about shower curtains? And do students need a vacuum cleaner?
Um, so again, we're going to get into like nuances of different buildings. You want to go on housing website to get the best information. Um, yeah, these are not details that I could speak to accurately for every single residential hall. So I would encourage you just to go on the website, housing's website, to see what amenities are being provided. Each residential hall has a list of amenities. If you have a question, you don't see something listed there, call PC and ask and tell them your specific residential hall, and they'll be able to give you the most accurate information.
Thank you. And we were speaking to a student affairs colleague the other day who's also a Pitt mom. Her daughter's about to be a junior. And we were like, what's your number one advice for new families? And she's like, that we have a Target. Do not worry if you feel like you didn't get to bring everything, that Target is just right down the road. And so hopefully that helps when you're thinking about packing and hopefully not overpacking. This next question is, can you speak more about the living learning communities? You mentioned that if your residence hall has a specific LLC, you can participate. Has the time passed to sign up for an LLC housed in another residence hall?
Yes. Yes, the time has passed for that. But again, what I'll say is that if you have a student who is living in a residential hall where there is an LLC, and they will know we're working on a huge branding campaign so that when you go into our high traffic areas, you know exactly what LLC is in that building. Um, they have the ability to engage and participate in the programs and activities of that living learning community. The Living Learning Communities program is made up of both thematic and academic based communities. And it's just a way to build some more structure and theme around connection. Um, I think when living learning communities kind of got off the ground 10, 15, 20 years ago, we were really focused on like, these are additional educational opportunities. That's still important. But I think what I've learned, and even some of the feedback and the assessments that I've done with students, is that they're wanting to have that experience to connect. So again, it's another opportunity to build relationships, not only with the students on your floor or in your building who maybe are also interested in music or are also in the School of Engineering, but also we have opportunities to connect with faculty, some of our other staff members here, a lot of our partners that work in our LLCs are academic advisors, or they work in some of our student affairs offices that specialize in that thematic area. And then beyond that, we always do one off-campus excursion for each LLC. Sometimes they do more, but that's the expectation. So they're going off campus. Engineering last year went to this really fabulous, I'm really into like arcades and pinball. They went to a place called Pinball PA, and they got to open up a pinball machine and learn about the schematics and how that works and the history of video games. Folks have gone to Heinz Hall to watch a symphony performance, and they got to like talk to the conductor backstage. Um, River rescue was something I believe Health Sciences has done in the past as well. So there's a lot of opportunities to connect on multiple levels. That's sort of the name of the game of the LLC experience. And nothing is mandatory. Again, this is all stuff that's on your student to be brave and step out and try. We try to offer like a lot of pretty easy, low risk engagement at the beginning, like come have a donut and talk to people in your LLC at the beginning. That way we can hook folks in and maybe they'll come back and do some of these other higher engagement activities later in the year. So that's a little bit about the LLCs.
Thank you so much. So we are coming up on our end of our hour together. There are a number of questions still in the Q&A. I want to let you know that we are not ignoring you. These are just questions for other departments, and I don't want to put Micah Lee on the spot to answer something that we might not have the full answer for. So please know that we are not ignoring you, and we really value that you've taken this time to spend here with us and ask these questions. We know how important they are for you to be able to get your student ready and to feel like you have all the information. So I do apologize if your question has not been answered. It's just for another department, and hopefully that department is Panther Central, or you can email the Office of Parent and Family Resources at parents, that's parents with an S, so plural, at pitt.edu. I say the office, but it's me. So I'll be the one that responds to your email, and I would love to be able to get you that correct information. I'm sorry we just didn't have the time to get all of that tonight. I do have to see one last question about will this be put on YouTube? Yes. Give us just a day or two, and our video team will put this recording up on the Pitt Student Affairs YouTube channel. Truly, the easiest way to find it is to just Google Pitt Student Affairs YouTube, and it'll be right there. It'll pop up as one of the first videos because it'll be one of our most recently added. But Micah Lee, thank you so much. Make sure during arrival, if you see Micah Lee, that you let her know that you saw her on this webinar and stop and say hello. We love to chat with families. We're really excited. We're really excited, and we hold all those same big emotions that you have, and we're so excited that you're part of our Pitt family. Micah Lee, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Summer. Thanks to all of you for taking the time, and huge thanks to Shannon for managing the chat on the back end. I really appreciate it. I love all these claps. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you all. Have a really good night.
Bye.